Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to class at your home from my home. My name is Mrs. Notton, and I'm an HISD teacher at River Oaks Elementary. And I'm so excited to be meeting with you again this week. For the past few weeks, we have been talking about reading, my favorite subject. And boys and girls, we know that strong readers read every day. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can make inferences in a story. Boys and girls, inferences are using clues that the author gives us to make predictions or guesses about what's going to happen next. But before we get into that, I want to go over our objective. So let's take a look at what we're going to know by the end of this session. Let's take a look at that. The objective says readers will be able to use clues and connections in the story to make inferences about the characters and plot. Boys and girls, we learned that word last week, plot. Let's take a look at what that meant. Plot, boys and girls, is how the author organizes the story. So when we read, there is a beginning, middle, and end. The story follows a sequence so that we know what's happening. And last time we talked about the problem and the solution that happens. Usually it introduces in the beginning. We figure out how to solve it. And then when the problem is solved is the end of the story. Well, we're going to use the plot, boys and girls, the beginning, middle, and end to figure out some inferences. And so using the clues and the plot and the story to help us, we can make guesses about the characters, which we've spoke about before, who or what the story is about. And we're going to figure out guesses about what happens to the characters and what happens in the story by using clues. The author gives us those clues and we tie them into our own connections to make those guesses, boys and girls, and we're going to be doing that today. So let's take a look once again at what an inference is. An inference uses clues to make smart guesses about the story, or, like I said, the plot. I am going to use the clues that I read, the clues that the author gives me, using the pictures or using the words. And then I'm going to think about what I already know to make a final inference. I'm really excited to do that today, boys and girls. And so I have chosen a book that we can make inferences about. Let's go ahead and do that. I don't know if you remember this book, boys and girls, but we used The Tale of Johnny Mouse to help us with our plot. And we looked at this story to help us earlier in the weeks before. And we're going to use it again, The Tale of Johnny Mouse by Bellatrix Potter. I love this story because the characters are mice. And that's always fun when we have characters that aren't real people, because we obviously can tell that the characters in the story are made up characters, because we know that in real life, boys and girls, mice don't talk. So I know something right away. I know that this is a fictional story. I know that it's made up because in real life, mice don't talk. And in this story, the mice are talking. So here we have Johnny Town Mouse. And Johnny Town Mouse, we found out that he was very curious. We used this story to help with internal and external traits, and now we're going to use this story to make inferences. So one story that we read, boys and girls, can be read over and over again, and we learn something new every single time. So let's read to find out if we can figure out some inferences about Johnny Town Mouse and who he meets along the way. Johnny Town Mouse was born in a cupboard. Timmy Willy was born in a garden. Timmy Willy was a little country mouse who went to town by mistake in a hamper. The gardener sent vegetables to town once a week by carrier. He packed them in a big hamper. The gardener left the hamper by the garden gate so the carrier could pick it up when he passed. Timmy Willy crept in through a hole in the wicker work, and after eating some peas, Timmy Willy fell fast asleep. He woke up in a fright while the hamper was being lifted into the carrier's cart. Then there was a jolting and a clattering of a horse's feet. Other packages were thrown in for miles and miles. Jolt, jolt, jolt. And Timmy Willy trembled amongst the jumbled vegetables. At last, the cart stopped at the house where the hamper was taken out, carried in, and set down. The cook gave the carrier 6 pence. The back door banged, and the cart rumbled away, but there was no quiet. There seemed to be hundreds of carts passing. Dogs barked, boys whistled in the street, and the cook laughed. The parlor maid ran up and downstairs, and the canary sang like a steam engine. Now, boys and girls, I want to make an inference just while we're reading right now. So first off, we have Timmy Willy in the garden. And we know that he has made a little mistake by going into this hamper. He's fallen asleep, and now I am inferring that he's no longer in the garden. And I know those things because I have a lot of clues to support that. I have the clues to let me know that the carrier has come and picked him up. I have the clues to know that he's no longer in the garden because I have picture clues to show me that. And of course, the words have told me that he is no longer there. He's traveled far. Another thing I noticed is that he traveled far because it says for miles and miles. Those, boys and girls, are all clues. There's one more thing that I'm going to make a connection with. I know that when you are in town, it's a little bit louder than being in the country. I'm making an inference that it is a lot louder in the town than it is in the country. I know that for 2 reasons. Number 1, I'm using my own personal connections. Have you ever been in the country? Yeah, so the countryside, boys and girls, has maybe babbling brooks and quiet gardens and areas that you can see a lot of outdoor space. So how is that different than being in town? You're right, it's a little bit louder. So I've made a couple of inferences using my connections. I've also used the clues that the author has given me that he is no longer in the garden. The cart has gone miles and miles. He is now in a loud environment, and he is being carried and jumbled around. I'm also making some inferences about how much it cost. The words say 6 pence. The cook gave the carrier 6 pence. Now, I don't know what that word means, boys and girls, and I've never heard of it before, but I'm going to infer that that must mean money, because they are exchanging the vegetables for money. When I go to the grocery store, I have to pay for my vegetables. If I go to the farmer's market, I have to pay for my vegetables. So I'm going to infer that in exchange for the vegetables, they have given them 6 pence. I'm using those clues to help me understand the story, to understand the plot. And here I am in town. They've exchanged the vegetables, and now I'm going to infer that it's going to be very different for Timmy Willy. Well, let's keep reading and figure this all out. Timmy Willy, who had lived all his life in a garden, was almost frightened to death. Presently, the cook opened the hamper and began to unpack the vegetables. Out sprang the terrified Timmy Willy. Up jumped the cook, and in a chair, exclaiming, "A mouse! A mouse! Call the cat! Fetch me the poker!" He rushed along and skirting board till he came to a little hole, and in he popped. He dropped half a foot and crashed into the middle of a mouse dinner party, breaking 3 glasses. "Who in the world is this?" inquired Johnny Town Mouse. But after the first exclamation of surprise, he instantly recovered his manners. All right, I'm inferring that Timmy Willy is a little out of place. How do you know that he's a little out of place? You're right, boys and girls. He doesn't look like the other mice. There's a couple of things that are different about Timmy Willy and the town mouse. What are those things? Well, right off the bat, he is not wearing clothes. It looks as though the town mice have on clothes, sort of jackets and maybe some sports coats type outfit. And he's not wearing anything. He's more from the country mouse. He's a field mouse is what they call them. And the town mouse seem a little bit more proper. They're sitting down for a fancy dinner, not very much like Timmy Willy in the beginning of the story. He's just eating vegetables from the hamper. He's not sitting down in a nice fancy dinner party. So I'm inferring that they are very different. Let's read to find out if my inferences are right. With the utmost politeness, he introduced Timmy Willy to the 9 other mice, all with long tails and white neckties. Timmy Willy's own tail was insignificant. Johnny Town Mouse and his friends noticed it, but they were too well bred to make personal remarks. Only one of them asked Timmy Willy if he had ever been in a trap. Okay, I think I was right. I think you were right, boys and girls. Things are different. They are wearing these white coat neckties. They're a lot more proper than Timmy Willy, and they're very polite. So our inferences were correct, that they are very different mice. They come from different backgrounds and they have different ways of living. So let's continue to read. The dinner was of 8 courses, not much of anything, but truly elegant. All of the dishes were unknown to Timmy Willy, who would have been a little afraid of tasting them, only he was very hungry and very anxious to behave with company manners. The continual noise upstairs made him nervous, that he dropped a plate Never mind, they don't belong to us, said Johnny. Why don't those youngsters come back with the dessert? It should be explained that two young mice who were waiting on the others went skirmishing upstairs to the kitchen between courses. Several times they had come tumbling in, squeaking and laughing. Timmy Willy learnt with honor that they were being chased by the cat. His appetite failed, and, and he felt faint. Try some jelly, said Johnny Town Mice. Ooh, I'm inferring something here about the cat. What are you inferring? Yeah, Timmy Willy is scared. Here's the cat right here. Timmy Willy is very concerned about the cat, but these two mice are very familiar and they are just scurrying to get the food and come back. So although Timmy Willy is scared of the cat, these mice are used to it. I inferred that two ways. I inferred that with connections. I inferred that because most mice are afraid of cats. I've learned that since I was a little girl that mice and cats don't get along. So I used my connections, but I also used the author's clues. The author clues said that they were being chased in, and he used words like horror, okay, and trembling and laughing. And he's a little nervous about it. But Johnny is like, here, try some jelly, trying to keep his mind off of it. So boys and girls, I'm using those inferences. You are using those inferences with me to figure this story out and a little bit more about Timmy Willy. So he's asked him if he'd like to try some jelly. Let's continue. No? Would you rather go to bed? I will show you the most comfortable sofa pillow. The sofa pillow had a hole in it. Johnny Town Mouse quite honestly recommended as the best bed, kept exclusively for visitors. But the sofa smelt of cat. Timmy Willy preferred to spend a miserable night under the fender. Okay, here we go again. It's confirming our inferences. What did Timmy Willy decide to do? Instead of sleeping in the nice, comfortable pillow that is reserved exclusively for guests, Timmy Willy has opted to stay by the fender. Rather a miserable night than to spend it with the cat. Because look, I see the cat right here and he's next to the pillow. It was just the same next day. An excellent breakfast was provided for mice accustomed to eat bacon, but Timmy Willy had been reared on roots and salad. Johnny Town Mouse and his friends racketed about under the floors and came boldly out over the house in the evening. One particularly loud crash had been caused by Sarah tumbling downstairs with a tea tray. There were crumbs and sugars and smears of jam to be collected in spite of the cat. Timmy Willy longed to be at home in his peaceful nest in a sunny bank. The food disagreed with him. The noise prevented him from sleeping. In a few days, he grew so thin that Johnny Town Mouse noticed it and questioned him. He listened to Timmy Willy's story and inquired about the garden. It sounded rather a dull place. What do you do when it rains? So boys and girls, I'm noticing something. Timmy Willy is not very happy here. He's not happy in town. He misses the countryside. He misses the quiet. He doesn't like the bustling of the town. And I know that from several reasons. I know that it's quiet and peaceful. And it says right here, he missed his peaceful nest. Sometimes boys and girls, I don't have to infer too much because the author gives me more than enough information to figure out what's going on in the story. But I use my connections to infer. Now, I'm seeing that Timmy Willy is upset. And I also know that Johnny Mouse notices it. What do you think is going to happen? Yes, boys and girls, we can infer. We can use our inferences to think maybe Timmy Willy will go back and maybe Johnny Mouse might help him out. I wonder if that's going to be the case. I'm going to see. I'm going to keep reading to find that out. When it rains, I sit in my little sandy burrow and shell corn and its seeds from the autumn store. I peep out at the throstles and the blackbirds in the lawn and my friend Cock Robin. And when the sun comes out again, you should see my garden and flowers, roses and pinks and pansies. No noise except for the birds and the bees and the lambs in the meadows. He's telling him the differences of the countryside and the town. There goes that cat again, exclaimed Johnny Mouse. When they had taken refuge in the coal cellar, he resumed the conversation. I confess, I'm a little disappointed. We have endeavored to entertain you, William. Oh, yes, you have been most kind, but I do feel so ill, said Timmy Willy. So I'm inferring a couple of things here, boys and girls. I'm inferring that Johnny has really worked hard to make Timmy Willy feel comfortable, but it is just not home. You see this in the clues. Timmy Willy looks so upset. I see that in the pictures. His tummy is upset. He is not feeling well. He's terrified of the cat, and he just wants to be back in the quiet. It is no offense to Johnny Mouse, but he just wants to be home. And I'm inferring that he's just not feeling well enough to stay there, even though the town mice are really trying to keep him comfortable. Let's keep reading to see if he gets home. It may be that your teeth and digestion are unaccustomed to our food. Perhaps it might be wiser for you to return in the hamper. Oh, cried Timmy Willy. Why, of course, for the matter of that, we have sent you back last week, said Johnny rather huffily. Did you not know that the hamper goes back empty on Saturdays? So Timmy Willy said goodbye to his new friends and hid in the hamper with a crumb of a cake and withered cabbage leaf. And after much jolting, he was set down safely in his own garden. Oh my goodness, good thing that Johnny told him about the hamper returning back. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about as far as inferencing what happened in that story. We inferred, boys and girls, that Timmy Willy was very unhappy. We inferred those by looking at the pictures and making connections. He missed the quiet countryside, he missed his simple food, and he missed all the things about his home at the garden. We inferred that by using the text clues that the author gave us, and we inferred that because we knew some things that we knew about the countryside and that we knew about being in town, and he just didn't prefer it. And Johnny helped him realize that he could go back to the garden. He just never assumed that he would want to go back to the garden. So he told him to go into the hamper and get back to his home. So, boys and girls, there's a lot of things that we used here. We use the author's clues, we use the author's words to help us understand and infer about the two mice. We also use the pictures, the illustrations were also clues that we use to help us infer about the beginning, middle, and end of the story. We concluded, boys and girls, that he would probably go back to the garden, and we were able to make those guesses using those clues. We also were able to make those guesses using our connections, boys and girls. Using those clues and connections in a story helps us to make smart guesses about what is going to happen in the story. We can infer characters' feelings, we can infer characters' actions, and we can infer the ending of a story. We can infer, boys and girls, by using all of those things, the clues, the pictures, and our connections to figure out the story. So I'm going to backtrack, boys and girls. We're going to start from the very beginning. We started simply with the characters and the setting. The characters, boys and girls, are the people, animals, or creatures in a story. The characters go through adventures like Timmy Willy and Johnny Town Mouse. Those were the characters. They were animals that were make-believe. They are make-believe because they spoke. The setting, boys and girls, is where and when the story takes place. In the story that we just read, at first it took place in the garden. Then it took place in town. Boys and girls, we always start with the characters and setting. Once we identify them, we can go on to the plots, internal and external traits, and inferences. Let's take a look once again at those. The character traits, external, what we see, hair, clothes, actions, facial expressions, and height. The internal, their thoughts, feelings, and words. We use the character traits to figure out our inferences today, boys and girls. Those were the clues that we used to help us. We used the inferences and the character traits to help us with the plot. What happens in the beginning, middle, and end of the story. All of those things, boys and girls, all of those things in our brain about reading help us become stronger readers. The other thing, boys and girls, helps us is reading every day. So I want you to remember, as a reader, you can do several things. You can start with the characters and the setting. From there, you can look at external and internal traits. From there, you can make the inferences. And from there, boys and girls, you have the beginning, middle, and end of the story, sometimes including a problem and a solution. There's so much that you can do in your reading, and you can read the same book over and over. We've used the same book twice now, and we've learned different things in the story. So boys and girls, today and every day, I want you to see if you can do any of those things in your story. Today we focused on inferencing though. So I want you to find that just right book, and I want you to see if you can make some inferences using clues in your story. Using clues from the author, the illustrator, and from your very own connections. So boys and girls, it's now your time to do that on your own. I want you to take that book, find a nice quiet place, and enjoy your reading. Happy reading, boys and girls, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Goodbye.